Welcome to our 10-minute table talk, everyone. I am Pastor Holman. Thank you for joining us here today. In Isaiah chapter 5, verse number 20, here's what it reads. Woe to those who call good evil and evil good, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. It is obvious that we are living in a very different world than what many of us knew just some 20 years ago. This is a different generation than that in which our previous generations enjoyed. What was always good is now looked upon as evil. What was always thought to be evil is now looked upon as good. Truth has not now been defined as black and white, but more of matters of gray. We talk about things like that's your truth and I have my truth. Truth has now all of a sudden become very subjective in the eyes of many people. If you've been watching the news for any length of time, you've heard about the trans woman swimmer, Lia Thomas. This is a trans woman who was biologically born a man. And this weekend, the world finally woke up and realized that this type of ideology is going to eventually wipe out women's sports completely. The image of University of Pennsylvania swimmer Lia Thomas, the first transgender athlete to win the NCAA title in the women's 500 freestyle, towering over biologically female swimmers who came runner-up. Lia Thomas was born a man and sits at a tremendous 6'3", 220 pounds. As he was competing as a male swimmer, he was ranked 462nd in the world. As he was competing as a male swimmer, he was ranked 462nd. When he converted, when he transitioned, as you will, at the age of 21, he went from 462 to number one. He went from 462 when competing against naturally biologically born men to number one when competing against women. This man who decided at 21 years old, when he has been swimming since he was 5, to now transition to be a female swimmer is now wiping out his competition. The runner-up to this event last weekend was a woman by the name of Emma Wayne. She actually participated in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics when she medaled in the 500 meter relay. This woman, who was an Olympic swimmer, comes in second to this biological man who transitioned to be a woman to compete in women's sports. This is where we are in America. We have women now in this particular field that have trained all of their lives for a particular sport, for a particular event, only to give that sport to a person that has an undue advantage against them. I have a daughter right now that participates at a high level in track. She's got dreams and aspirations of going to LSU, to Texas A&M, to the University of Texas, and pursuing her track dreams at a collegiate level. She trains very, very hard. She has been on varsity since a freshman in high school. She trains very hard and she is very passionate about track and field. And she does very well at it, not just being my daughter. She has put in the work and is now receiving the reward from the work that she puts in. But I've oftentimes thought about, as my daughter lines up to do the 400 meter relay, and lines up right next to her a biological man who transitions to be a woman to compete in women's track, who lines up right next to my daughter to run the same race that my daughter has been training for multiple years. Regardless of the training that my daughter may have put in, regardless of the time that she spent on the track, regardless of how she has tried to hone her skills, that man, when he lines up next to her, has an unfair advantage over my daughter. And that unfair advantage will cripple her in the chances that she has in order to reach the next level. This transgender man, Lia Thomas, 6'3", wins the 500-yard freestyle, towering over his closest competition at 5'7". 220 plus pounds is Lia Thomas. The closest one to him was 146 pounds. She finished almost 3 seconds behind him, which is an eternity when you're talking about competitive swimming. But here we are in the world right now where women have fought tooth and nail for the advantages, for the same equal opportunity as men enjoy, to now have it all taken from you in a moment's notice. How is this fair to women? How did this put women on an equal playing field when men are allowed to participate in women-only sports? Title VII and one of the executive orders by President Joe Biden was snatched on his first day of office. Title VII is a specific title that keeps men participating in men's sports and women participating in women's sports. You never see women converting to men's sports, but you always see men converting to women's sports to give men an unfair advantage against their counterparts. This man, who was 462nd when competing against men, now becomes number one in the world when competing against women. How is that fair to women? Where is the uproar when this is happening? As the women's lib movement and women liberation, the women's suffrage movement, which took over 100 years for women to stand in the gap and demand to be treated equally as their male counterparts, seemingly now is being turned up on their heads. Seemingly now anybody at any given time for any given reason can now associate to being a woman, and a woman can associate to being a man. We have now entered into the space where Isaiah 5:20 is actually happening right before our eyes. There was a point in time in which we would be, this was a truth that was not even debated. Biological features, the chromosomes between male and females, was a scientific issue that didn't even need to be discussed because it was as concrete can be. There was once a time in which a man was just thought to be a man and a woman was once thought to be a woman, but now we are living literally in a time where they can jump out of their sexes into another sex. And we must now be forced to accept that reality when we obviously know that that reality is not reality. Here's where we are right now in our world. My question to you, my question to the world is, how is this fair? How is it fair for this 6'3" man to get into a pool with biologically born women and compete on the same level as these women who have been training for years to hone their craft? How is that fair? It is because we have all but abandoned truth, and truth now has become an option rather than a necessity. And without truth, my dear friends, we won't be able to recognize right from wrong. We won't be able to distinguish from that which will help us to that which will harm us. Without truth as the absolute objective standard that has no political affiliation, that has no racial affiliation, truth is objective. To all of those who love the rights of all, why is not the rights of women being stood up for in instances like this? This is not the only case by far. The MMA, mixed martial arts, a transgender female fought with a biologically born woman in the center stage in the octagon. Pummeled her to almost death. He cracked her skull. A biologically born man transitioned to a woman to fight in an MMA arena with a biologically born woman and cracked her skull, almost causing her death. How is that fair? Because we've entered into a space where Isaiah said, "Woe to those who call good evil and evil good. They put darkness for light and light for darkness. They put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." We're now living in those times. It is time for us to wake up. It is time for us to say enough is enough. It is time for us to put a clear line in the sand that we won't tolerate this anymore. God is calling for us to stand on the side of truth. It is a mandate given to us by our Savior. And if you love truth, speaking truth might cost you something, but in the end, it'll save your life. Until we see you next week, God bless you.